They say that love is unconditional. They say that when you stand at the altar and promise to stay together in sickness and in health, you never really imagine what the sickness part will look like. You imagine bringing soup to a bedside when they have the flu. You imagine holding hands in a retirement home when you're both old and gray. You don't imagine sitting in a sterile, white-walled office with the smell of antiseptic stinging your nose, staring at a piece of paper that doesn't just diagnose a disease, it diagnoses a lie. I looked at my husband, Mark. He was sitting in the wheelchair next to me, his skin the color of old parchment, his eyes sunken and terrified. He was dying. My Mark, the man I had shared my coffee with for 22 years, the man who folded my laundry and warmed my side of the bed on winter nights, was fading right in front of me. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "It's going to be okay, Elena," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Whatever Dr. Aris says, we'll figure it out." I squeezed his hand back, feeling that familiar surge of protective love. I would have done anything for him. I would have walked through fire. I would have given him the breath from my lungs. And, as we were about to find out, I was ready to give him a part of my own body. But the silence in the room wasn't the silence of bad medical news. I had been a nurse for 10 years before I retired to take care of the house. I knew the look of a doctor who has bad news about a prognosis. Dr. Aris didn't look sad. He looked uncomfortable. He looked confused. He shifted the papers on his desk, clearing his throat. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Mrs. Bennett," the doctor said, not looking at Mark, but looking directly at me, "we have the results of the HLA compatibility testing, the detailed genetic breakdown we run to ensure the organ won't be rejected." "Is it a match?" I asked, leaning forward. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "I'm a universal donor blood type. It should be fine, right?" "The blood type is fine," Dr. Aris said slowly, "but the genetic markers brought up something else, something we need to discuss privately." I felt Mark's hand stiffen in mine, not a tremble, but a sudden rigid freeze. "No," Mark said, too quickly. "Discuss it here. She's my wife. She knows everything." I looked at Mark. Sweat was beading on his upper lip. He wasn't looking at the doctor. He was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. That was the moment. That was the tiny fracture in the glass before the whole window shattered. I didn't know it yet, but the man holding my hand was already a stranger. To understand why this moment broke me, you have to understand who we were before the kidneys failed. Mark and I were the couple everyone else wanted to be. We weren't rich and we weren't famous, but we were steady. We met in our late 20s. I was working double shifts at the hospital, and he was an architect trying to get his own firm off the ground. He courted me with a patience that felt rare. He didn't play games. He showed up. For 22 years, he was my rock. We never had children. Biological issues on my end, we thought. But Mark never made me feel less than because of it. "We have each other, Elle," he would say, kissing my forehead on the nights I cried about empty nurseries. "That's enough for me. You are enough." Our life was a rhythm of comfortable habits. Sunday mornings were for pancakes and crossword puzzles. Tuesday nights we went to the movies. He called me every single day at lunch just to ask how my morning was. He was the kind of man who stopped to help strangers change tires in the rain. He was the treasurer of our church. He was good. Or so I thought. 3 months ago, the normalcy ended. Mark started complaining of fatigue. He was sleeping 14 hours a day. His ankles swelled up like balloons. I kept telling him to go to the doctor, but like so many men, he was stubborn. Just stress, Elle. Just a bug. Then came the collapse. I was in the kitchen chopping onions for a pot roast. I heard a thud from the living room, heavy and dull. I ran in, the knife still in my hand, and found him face down on the carpet. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. By the time we got to the emergency room, his blood pressure was through the roof, and his creatinine levels were lethal. End-stage renal disease, the nephrologist told us later that night. His kidneys are functioning at less than 8%. He needs dialysis immediately, but the only long-term solution is a transplant. The wait list for a kidney is 5 to 7 years. Mark didn't have 5 years. He barely had 5 months. I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Test me, I told the transplant coordinator the very next morning. I'm healthy, I don't drink, I don't smoke. Take mine. Mark cried when I told him. He wept openly in the hospital bed, burying his face in my hands. You do that for me? He sobbed. After everything I put you through with the sickness? Alina, you're a saint. You're too good for me. Don't be silly, I whispered, stroking his thinning hair. We're one flesh, remember? That's the vow. The testing process was grueling. Vials and vials of blood, psychological evaluations, CAT scans. It took weeks. During that time, Mark was on dialysis 3 days a week. It was draining him, hollowing him out. But as sick as he was, strange things started happening. Small things. Things I brushed off because, well, he was dying. Who questions a dying man? The first thing was the phone. Mark had never been protective of his phone. It usually sat on the kitchen counter, unlocked. But once dialysis started, he began keeping it under his pillow. If I walked into the room while he was texting, he'd lower the screen. Who are you talking to? I asked one afternoon, bringing him a glass of ice chips. Just work, he mumbled, sliding the phone under his thigh. Tying up loose ends at the firm, in case I don't make it. My heart broke for him. I scolded myself for being suspicious. He was preparing his will, preparing his legacy, and here I was wondering why he was hiding the screen. Then there was the money. I handled our household bills, but Mark managed our savings and investments. We needed to pay a specialist fee that wasn't covered by insurance, about $3,000. I went to transfer the money from our joint savings account, the rainy day fund we had been building for 20 years. The balance was significantly lower than I remembered, nearly $15,000 lower. I stared at the screen, blinking. I checked the transaction history. Cash withdrawals, several of them, over the last 6 months. $500 here, $2,000 there, all from ATMs in a part of the city Mark rarely visited, the North District, near the university. I felt a cold prickle of unease. That night after dialysis, when he was lying in bed, looking so frail, I asked him, Mark, the savings account, there have been a lot of withdrawals. Is everything okay? He flinched. It was subtle, but I saw it. His eyes darted to the left before meeting mine. It's medical bills, Elle, he sighed, sounding exhausted. Supplements not covered by insurance. Specialists I consulted online. I didn't want to worry you with the costs. I wanted to protect you. $15,000 in supplements? I asked gently. And I made a bad investment. Crypto. I was trying to double our money before I got sick so you'd be taken care of. I lost it. I'm so sorry, Elle. I'm so sorry. He started to cry again. He looked so pathetic, so beaten down by life and illness that my anger dissolved into pity. I hugged him. I told him money didn't matter. I told him we'd make it back once he was well. I believed him. Because why would a dying man lie to the woman who was about to save his life? But the universe has a way of exposing the truth, even when you try to close your eyes to it. And the truth wasn't in the bank account. It was in the blood. The air conditioner in the office hummed, a low, mechanical drone that seemed to get louder as the silence stretched on. Dr. Eris looked from me to Mark, then back to the papers in his hand. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of exhaustion, or perhaps reluctance. "Mrs. Bennet," he said softly, "I'm afraid you are not a match for your husband. Your antibody levels are too high relative to his antigens. If we proceeded with the transplant, his body would reject your kidney almost immediately. It would kill him." My stomach dropped. I felt the tears prick my eyes instantly. "No, no, there has to be a mistake. Check again. I'm healthy. I'm ready." "The science is clear, Elena," Mark said quickly, his voice tight. He squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Come on, let's go home." But Dr. Eris held up a hand. "Please sit down, Mr. Bennet. We aren't finished." Mark froze. He looked like a trapped animal. "While Mrs. Bennet is not a match," the doctor continued, his tone shifting to something more clinical, more puzzled, "our protocol involves running a search through the familial database to see if any immediate relatives who have been tissue typed in the past might be candidates. Sometimes siblings or children who have had blood work done for other procedures are in the system." I frowned. Mark is an only child. His parents passed 10 years ago, and as I told you, we don't have children. Dr. Eris paused. He looked at the file again, then looked at Mark with a piercing gaze. "That is what the intake form says. No children." "We don't," I insisted, confused by his persistence. "That's strange," Dr. Eris said. And he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring directly at Mark. "Because the HLA crossmatch flagged 2 individuals in the regional database with a 50% haploidentical match to Mr. Bennet. That level of genetic similarity is almost exclusively found in parent-child relationships." The room started to spin. I mean that literally. The corners of my vision went dark and the white walls seemed to tilt. "2 individuals?" I repeated, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. What does that mean?" "It means," the doctor said, his voice grave, "it means, according to these markers, Mr. Bennet has 2 biological children, 2 males, ages 19 and 21. I turned to Mark. He wasn't looking at me. He had released my hand. He was staring at his knees, his face the color of ash. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't shouting that it was a mistake. He was just sitting there, crumbling. "Mark?" I said. It came out as a squeak. He didn't answer. "Mark!" I screamed, the sound ripping out of my throat before I could stop it. He flinched. "Elena, please, not here." "Not here?" I stood up, my legs shaking so violently I had to grab the edge of the doctor's desk. "You have children? 2 sons? You have adult sons?" "I can explain," he whimpered. Dr. Eris stood up slowly. He looked uncomfortable, but there was a hardness in his eyes now. He knew he had just dropped a bomb, but medically he had to. "Mr. Bennet, if these young men are your sons, they are your best chance for survival. A direct child match significantly increases the success rate of a transplant. If you want to live, we need to contact them." Mark looked up then, and the look in his eyes wasn't shame. It was terror. Pure, selfish terror. "No," Mark rasped. "You can't contact them. They don't know." "They don't know what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They don't know you exist? Or they don't know I exist?" Mark closed his eyes. Dr. Eris stepped back. He said, "I'm going to give you 2 a moment. Mrs. Bennet, I am sorry." The door clicked shut, leaving us alone in the sterile silence. I drove for what felt like hours, even though it was probably only 40 minutes. I kept the windows down, letting the cold December air whip into the car, trying to clear the stench of hospital and lies from my system. My hands felt clumsy on the wheel. I wasn't weeping anymore. I was empty. I felt like a burned-out shell, holding only the pilot light of pure, cold purpose. I wasn't going to ruin a home. Mark had already done that. Twice. I was going to find the truth, and then I was going to dismantle the lie. Methodically. The North District was everything our quiet suburban street was not. It was alive, loud, cluttered. Students milled around sidewalks, their laughter drifting into the night air. The apartments were old brick buildings with fire escapes zigzagging down the sides. The smell was a mix of roasting coffee, cheap detergent, and exhaust. It felt younger, faster, messier, a fitting backdrop for Mark's secret life. I used my banking access, which I still hadn't revoked, to find the address associated with the recurring $500 payment he had listed under consulting fees in our shared ledger. It led me to a 3-story building, apartment 2B. I parked the car half a block away and just watched. The window for 2B was bright. The Venetian blinds were slightly tilted open, giving me a wedge-shaped view of the living room. It was warm and cluttered inside, full of books and college banners. And then I saw them. The shock wasn't that they were there. The shock was their normality. A woman, tall and thin, with dark hair tied up in a messy bun, Sarah, was curled up on the couch, grading papers. The television was on, muted. Across from her, on a rug, sat a young man, perhaps the 19-year-old, his profile strikingly like Mark's younger photos, laughing as he played a video game with another young man. They were eating pizza out of a box on the floor. It was a domestic scene, a normal, messy, boring family scene. It was the life I had always been proud of sharing with Mark, only it wasn't mine. It was theirs. The pain didn't come from anger. It came from the sudden, profound understanding that Mark hadn't just been having sex with another woman. He had carved out a complete second life. A life where he watched football with his sons, paid for their education, and presumably sat on that couch joking with Sarah. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had stolen our vows and given them to someone else. I watched them for 20 minutes until I saw Sarah stand up, grab her keys, and sling a thin purse over her shoulder. She was heading out. This was my chance. I couldn't confront her in front of the boys. Not yet. I wanted her alone. I got out of the car, my heart beginning to hammer in my chest, and walked quickly, cutting her off just as she reached her beat-up Toyota. "Sarah," I said, my voice low and level. She jumped, dropping her keys. She was startled, but not guilty, which confirmed my suspicion. She had no idea about me. She likely believed Mark was separated or perhaps even a widower. She looked tired, but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked, bending down to retrieve her keys. I waited until she stood back up. I didn't introduce myself with my name. I introduced myself with my title. "I'm Mark Bennett's wife," I said. The keys dropped again. This time, they clattered loudly on the pavement. Her face went slack, draining completely of color. She looked instantly nauseous. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. "He told me he was divorced years ago." "He told you a lot of things," I said, stepping closer. "He told me he was at work every Tuesday night. He told me he lost $15,000 on cryptocurrency. He told me he loved me." I reached into my bag, pulled out a small white envelope, and handed it to her. "This is the address of the hospital. It's the name of his nephrologist, Dr. Eris. Mark is currently admitted in the intensive care wing, receiving dialysis 3 times a week. He has end-stage renal failure. She stared at the envelope, her eyes wide with disbelief, then confusion, then panic. She ripped it open and looked at the hospital name, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He was here yesterday. He said he had the flu." "He's dying, Sarah," I stated flatly, "and I was willing to give him my kidney to save him." Her eyes lifted, meeting mine for the first time. There was raw hurt there, but still confusion. "Why are you telling me this? Is this some kind of sick revenge?" The HLA compatibility test revealed a few things about Mark's blood, Sarah. I continued, ignoring her question. It revealed that I am not a match, but it also revealed that he has 2 biological sons, 2 young men who are the only ones left who can save his life. I tilted my head toward the window of the apartment. The faint sound of video game laughter drifted down. "Your boys, Sarah. They are perfect 50% matches. They are likely his only hope. Mark didn't want the doctor to contact them. He didn't want you to know he was sick. He'd rather die than have his 2 lives collide." I felt no satisfaction in delivering the blow. Only a vast, cold emptiness. I hadn't come to scream at her or blame her. I had come to transfer the responsibility. "I am officially withdrawing myself as Mark's medical proxy and as his primary caretaker effective immediately. He is alone at the hospital, and he is afraid," I said, my voice hardening. "You can go back inside and call him. You can ask him why he lied to you, why he let you raise his children alone under a lie, and why he tried to take an organ from his wife while paying for your mortgage." I took a breath. I kept my vow, Sarah. I stood by him in sickness. But I did not vow to stand by a lie. I turned and walked back to my car, leaving her standing paralyzed by the driver's side of her Toyota, the hospital envelope clutched in her hand. The keys lay forgotten on the ground. The rage was gone. It had done its work, replaced by a terrible, clear clarity. I was free. But I knew the consequences of my action were just beginning to unfold in that little apartment and in that lonely hospital room. Mark was about to face the 2 families he had spent 20 years balancing, and neither of them was going to be holding his hand. It's been over a year now. The papers are finalized, and the final payment has cleared the accounts. My life is quiet, peaceful, and entirely my own. I still see Mark sometimes, not in person, but in the papers. He's back working, slower now, focused on small community projects. He pays his medical bills, and I hear, through the inevitable small-town grapevine, that his sons visit him for strictly scheduled lunches. The lies that saved his body ended up consuming his soul. I look at the small ceramic dish on my dresser, where his wedding band still sits. I don't touch it. It's a silent reminder that loyalty should never be blind. When I first volunteered to give him my kidney, I thought I was performing the ultimate act of love. I thought I was fulfilling my duty. But what I discovered on that sterile doctor's desk was that the greatest act of love I could perform was not for Mark, but for myself. My worth wasn't measured by the organ I was willing to sacrifice, but by the dignity I chose to reclaim. The most shocking thing about betrayal is how much it asks you to give up. Not just your trust, but your truth. I gave up a marriage, but I gained my entire life back. I lost a comfortable rhythm, but I found my true strength. The sickness Mark faced was one he had caused himself, and the only cure was the truth, delivered without mercy. I was the messenger of that truth. I often wonder about Sarah and her sons. They have a difficult, messy path ahead of them, but at least it is a path built on fact, not fiction. I wish them peace. To all of you who have given your best, your brightest, your deepest self to a person who was living a hitting life, remember the strength of your own spine. Remember that your vow of health and sickness applies to your own heart too. You cannot save someone else if you destroy yourself in the process. Would you have walked away from the hospital knowing you were leaving him to the mercy of his own choices? When did your vow of loyalty end? Tell me your thoughts below. And as always, thank you for sharing this space with me. If this story resonated with your own journey toward healing, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me share these hard-won lessons with others who need to hear them.